Hello. Hi. How's everyone doing? Megan here, the faithful fibromyalgia warrior. Just wanted to catch up, see how everyone was doing. For anyone who's watching, feel free to leave comments. Let me know how you're doing. How is your chronic pain? How is your fibromyalgia or your IBS or your anxiety or your depression? How is everyone doing today? I'm actually doing pretty well. And I don't get to say that a whole lot, but I am. My pain is actually pretty well managed right now. My fibro pain is under control. I am feeling faithful and joyful and grateful. And yet, the crazy thing is that I was struggling with how to start today's live stream. I wasn't even sure exactly what to talk about. So this is definitely a free-flowing time. And as I say, anybody who wants to leave comments, please feel free. The thing that I couldn't believe, really, that struck me the most was that the more I tried to procrastinate and not get started, the more I felt as though I need to do this. The spirit there just going, come on, Megan, come on. You never know who's listening. You never know who might be watching. You never know whose story might inspire you or who you might help with yours. So that's why I'm here. Um, the amazing thing about life isn't so much when things go well, it's how we can get through the things that don't go super well. You know what I mean? And so today was has been great. Like I said, overall, I'm feeling pretty great. I'm feeling very lucky. I feel like, God is looking after me as he always does. And certainly eating meat and walking with God through prayer has helped for certain. I will, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I will put out there that this is what I do. You don't have to, of course, obviously. You're free to do as you will. And certainly, if you have a faith in a different God or a God of your understanding, to borrow from 12-step programs, great, whatever helps you. Um, if you don't know my story, if you don't know me at all, or you've not seen my videos, I'll give you a brief, try to keep it brief background. So, I have struggled with significant anxiety since I was a child, probably since I was about 5, that I can recall. And even though, my parents and other people would say, "Oh, you're just a worrywart. You're just a worrier." It was more than that. It was anxiety. And of course, back in those days in the early 80s or even in the late 70s, this whole anxiety thing, it wasn't something that you could talk about even if you had it. So, unless you had significant anxiety or maybe you got panic attacks and things like that, it wasn't that big a deal. It was never considered a big deal, right? But I have been an anxious person since I was 5. I'm 50. I'll be 51 this year. So that's a long time to have anxiety. And for me, it's a generalized anxiety, so anything can cause it. It could be, oh my goodness, so I'm going to be cooking up beef ribs for us to have for dinner tonight. Yum. Um, but part of me is worried, like, I've never really done this before. Am I going to be able to cook them properly? Are they going to taste okay? What if the seasoning's not good? Meanwhile, I have a recipe. All I have to do is follow it and leave the rest up to the meat and the heat of the oven, right? And I can't worry about something I can't control. But that's the challenge with anxiety is that we know we can't control it. We still want to, and we're desperate to. And the more we try to control things we can't, the more cortisol we produce, the more our adrenals go into overdrive because we are just by those thoughts, we're putting our bodies into a fight or flight situation, which, again, I mean, God makes no mistakes. He made us that way. So if we were actually in a situation where we needed to fight back or run, for example, even if we think back to our ancestors, and we had to escape, say, from a charging bear or a lion or somebody with a bigger spear or a sharper sword, well, in that case, that adrenaline is awesome. And it would be the difference between us losing that confrontation or escaping and living another day. However, when I'm simply worrying about what's happening in the world, or my son who's moved, my younger son, I have two boys, well, they're adults now, but my younger son who's moved back to Canada, it's like, oh, is he okay? Is he going to find a nice girl? Is he ever going to settle down? Is he going to be, all those thoughts we have, especially as moms, I mean dads too, but all of it's completely out of my control. Even if he lived here where we live, it would be out of my control. And yet there's that anxiety. And so, one thing I've been trying to really work on, even just within the last 48 hours, is trying to force myself to calm down. Now, that is a lot harder than it sounds. Okay. And the truth be told, when I start to feel myself getting anxious, it may not even be because I'm worried about something. It might be, um, oh, if I leave this out, is the dog going to get it? Oh, if I forget to fix that button, will I get to do it later? Just everyday little things, right? That I have that I don't control. Um, and so those little things, or for example, if my older son, who still lives with us, if he and I have a disagreement or he gets upset and I'm trying to help him see, sorry, I talk with my hands. If he gets upset and I'm trying to provide him an answer, but he doesn't want to hear the answer or he doesn't understand the answer, I immediately can feel all of the adrenaline rush up. I can feel myself being filled with anger, and that anger causes me anxiety. And then I feel myself starting right on the verge of getting bloated because anxiety and stress can also set off my IBS. They can also trigger my fibromyalgia and my other inflammation, among other things. That's one of many triggers, right? And so what I've had to do, honestly, is in that moment I've had to literally just for one moment stop, close my eyes, and say something like, God, please give me patience. Please help me through this moment. And as I say, I believe in the God of Jesus, but if you believe in a different God, if you're from a different religion, or yours is simply some greater being than yourself, whatever helps you, do that. You know, I I believe in the God of Jesus, that he sent his son to die and we are saved through his sacrifice on the cross, all of it. But if that's not where you're at, then that's okay. That's not where you're at. But being able to say that, yeah, something greater than myself, because let's face it, when we know we can't control outcomes, there's better ways of trying to figure out how to manage life than being anxious about trying to control something we have no control over. You know what I mean? So that's what I've been working on. And of course, God has a sense of humor. You know why? Because last night, my son, now, as I've said before, he has autism, but he's very high functioning, very fairly independent. He had a question, and he didn't understand my answer, or he didn't like the answer. And normally, it would result in both of us having raised voices and walking away very frustrated and angry with each other. And when I stopped for a minute and just asked, look, you know, and I let out a very deep breath. I had to close my eyes. I had to just say to him, give me a minute. And just, I had to deep breath out, actually in and out a few times, calm my body. And at that moment, have a silent moment of prayer to just ask for patience, which I got, which was great. But so that's the thing I find that I have to work on every day. This morning it was great. I woke up, I felt very confident, I felt amazing and physically pretty healthy, and my pain was minimal. It was there, but it wasn't anything worse. And the other great thing was when I got dressed today, I felt confident. Those old lies that I often battle, even still in recovery from bulimia, do often rear their head. Normally, they come up when I'm feeling extremely anxious and stressed, and I haven't been able to relax and calm myself. And of course, anybody who struggles with body image, food addictions, and eating disorders, you know that it is quite common that when we feel stressed or anxious for any reason outside of the food, it's never about the food, right? It's always about other stuff. And so when that other stuff comes at us, what's the response? Well, I'm just going to binge, or I'm just going to purge, or I'm just going to restrict, or I'm going to dress in my baggiest possible clothes. I'm going to hide myself, um, tuck myself away. It's like this armor we put on, right? Thinking, well, it'll protect me. And again, if we have body image issues, it's insane to me that I lived for so long thinking, well, the baggier the clothes, the more oversized they are, the more they'll hide me and make me look smaller. And in fact, the opposite is true. And so you may have seen from my last live stream that the one thing I'm trying to do every day is wear clothes that actually fit, that are the right size, that I know for a fact are my size, and to not look in the mirror any longer than necessary than to just say, yep, I'm tucked in, or, oh, that's got a stain, I got to change, as opposed to being in front of it for a long period and thinking, oh, well, I look fat. No, no, can't wear it. No way. It doesn't suit me. I hate it. I'm not wearing it. So those are things I'm trying to do. And I did that. The first thing I did yesterday was just take a photo of myself. Oh, hello, Tony. Nice to have you here. Um, and I made myself look at that photo so that I could force myself to go, oh, wait a minute. That's me? Wow. And my husband, wonderful, loving, incredibly amazing husband. We'll be married 25 years in this March, on the 7th, that is. And I know, I don't look a day over 49. um, my husband said, really? You struggle still with those bulimic kind of thoughts and challenges? Yes. And he said, well, that's just silly, which was so wonderful that, you know, he saw that in me. But what it also made me realize even further was that, you know what? That is what recovery is in my mind. Okay. Whether it's recovery from food addictions, whether it's from illicit drugs or prescription drugs or alcohol or nicotine or coffee, which is, we won't go there because, whatever. But whatever it is that we cannot of our own willpower give up is an addiction. And so I never realized a couple things that people didn't know that I was struggling, which either meant I was really good at hiding it, or what I like to think is I was well on my way through to recovery. And that just simply means to me that there's not a cure, right? Like if you meet somebody who's a recovering alcoholic, you are not going to then offer them, like in a year's time, say, hey, it's been a year. Why don't you have a drink with me? Of course not. It means they can never pick it up again. But as long as they avoid it, they're doing great. So for me, I am not actively bulimic and have not been for 2.5 years. And for me, at least, there's a difference, right? There is a difference between active bulimic and not. So if I was actively bulimic, I would be binging, purging, either throwing up or taking laxatives, um, followed by loads of guilt and severe restricting. And that would be an ongoing pattern. That is not me. However, um, no, sorry, Dhruv Jan, I'm not. I'm only doing it online on YouTube at the moment. I am not super tech savvy, unfortunately. So I haven't worked out how to do that. I will probably try to do that on Facebook at some point or possibly Instagram. But the fact that I could actually get my webcam to work is like a big deal for me. I'm not a tech person, but that's what I'm hoping to do eventually. So thanks for the question. So what I was just saying about being an active bulimic or even anorexic, really, versus mentally there but not active, and that's what happens with some of us. When I had to admit to my parents when I was 19 that I was at that point I was more on the anorexic side, and so they didn't know what to do. They had no idea how to help. There wasn't a whole lot out there. This was like 1990, I think, maybe. Yeah. So back in those days. And it was only just becoming known in mainstream. Not you didn't hear about a whole lot of people with eating disorders at that point. And so my mom and dad picked me up. I'd been working as a summer camp counselor, and they came and got me. They took me back to the cottage for I think it was a week, and then we went back home to the city. And the first thing my mom did was take me to a nutritionist. Now, knowing what I know about the benefits of eating a carnivorous diet, I have to laugh because obviously she gave really poor advice, but it wasn't like I followed it anyways because I wasn't ready to stop. I didn't want to quit. No way. I was going to look a certain way. Didn't matter what happened, how long it took. Didn't matter if at one point I felt like I didn't care if I starved to death as long as I died. As long as when I died, it was a size 6. That's US, Canada sizes. A size 10 over here in England, which is what I am, but by eating properly. Okay. So I was told, yeah, you got to try a little bit of everything in moderation so you're not afraid of food. And of course, that just made me more anxious because if I ate, then I was going to want more and I was going to feel guilty and I was going to go right back to where I was. So I had all that anxiety going on over food and, loving carbs and sugar. And that became very quickly um, an easy way for me to become addicted to diet colas, which I did. I drank easily 8 to 10 cans of Diet Coke a day because it was an appetite suppressant. And I so badly screwed up my metabolism and my hormones were out of whack and I had horrible cycles. To be honest with you, by the time I did eventually get married and got pregnant with my first son, with my older son, I was surprised I got pregnant so quickly because I knew my metabolism was totally messed up. And it was almost impossible for me to lose weight no matter what I did. And of course, that changes after pregnancy, anyhow. So that was during my 2 pregnancies. I ate what I thought was healthy. I didn't worry too much about any weight going on because I knew I was pregnant. I was growing a human. But towards the end of each pregnancy, I started to panic because I thought, oh my goodness, once the baby's born and the baby's only going to be probably 6 or 7 pounds, I've got all this other weight I have to lose. How am I ever going to do that? How am I ever going to get back to my pre-baby size? And of course, all the celebrities in the magazines at that time were, had all these, I lost my baby weight in 3 weeks and look at me now and all this sort of thing. And I just thought, well, I don't have that kind of money. What am I going to do? And that became my focal point. And so, you forward that up to say, so yeah. So my problems, my challenges with bulimia and having carb addictions and sugar addictions and just a disordered relationship with food had been there since I was very young. And I remember, I think when I was at least 12, maybe 11, um, already wondering how I was going to be able to do my very first diet without my parents finding out, because they would have put a stop to it. How was I going to sneak out and do this? Right. So that was with me for so long. And it was such a big part of me that even when I did finally find recovery from the binging, purging, and restricting cycle, I found it really, really, really difficult, like really difficult, to get rid of that mentality. So even those thoughts of, oh my gosh, if I eat, I'll get fat, or what if I get bloated, or how am I going to wear this? And my weight's gone up 2 pounds, oh, but then it went down 4. All of that other stuff besides just the food, I didn't know what to do without it because it was a part of me for so long. And I realized in a weird way, I was feeling anxious about getting healthy. I was anxious about healing. It was one of those things where, if you've tried every possible way to lose weight and none of it works, and which, by the way, none of it really does work. Okay. As far as the fad stuff, like the powders and the pills and the liquids and the juices and the, superfoods and the smoothies, that really doesn't work. Not for long, at least. Okay. And speaking as someone who was paleo briefly for 2 to 3 weeks and had like spinach smoothies, and I would fry up kale with coconut oil and eggs. Wow. Uh, if you want to make your IBS the worst you've ever experienced, do that. Okay. Seriously, it was a horrible idea. Horrible idea. And I didn't even understand what oxalates were or any of these anti-nutrients that were in the dark leafy greens that apparently were superfoods that I was eating every day. Couldn't figure out why I was horribly constipated, why I was painfully bloated, and I looked 7 months pregnant when I was eating all these healthy things. So that's before I had the knowledge I do now. But even then, for such a long time, I was always, oh, I had bulimia once. And then, okay, but then what? And I realized I want my life story to be about more than that. And I think the reality is for me at least, and this is just me, is that um, as much as I do not consider myself to be bulimic, because learning how to eat to satiety, um, and that has been what's helped me. There are many people who come out of eating disorders or disordered eating, and as far as for me, intermittent fasting, I knew I couldn't. And that oh, but that's a good question, by the way, Juvie. Is that it can, from what I understand, yes, it can help with your insulin because the longer you go without food, the lower your insulin goes, right? And definitely, I would say check out videos by Dr. Ken Berry. He's got some amazing content out there. Um, I would say also somebody good to check out, and his wife Nisha has a great channel too. I also like to watch Rebecca Heichman, Go Keto with Casey. I also like to follow Bart Kay and his partner Pim Janssen. They have great content out there. I know for me that I cannot like consciously, specifically intermittent fast. And the reason why is for me, it brings too much back from those days, those eating disorder days. So I don't plan intermittent fasting for me. I don't do it intentionally, and that's because I know it's a trigger, but I do know it's been helpful. As with sometimes the timed eating windows. So, for example, my brother and sister-in-law were keto way back in, I think it was 2016, to help with her psoriatic arthritis. And they did intermittent fasting, and it was a huge help. I don't eat falafel. For me personally, I don't eat any vegetables. Okay, so anybody who's wondering, I assume you guys probably all know, but if you're keto, then you're basically eating mostly animal products or animal meats and some of their products. So, you know, whether it's pork or poultry or lamb or beef, and maybe eggs, including the yolks, maybe dairy if you tolerate it, and, maybe a handful or two of non starchy vegetables like broccoli or cauliflower. That's keto. Ketovore, I would say you're closer to, um, you know, oh, and the plan is to keep your total carbs to 20 grams or less per day, right? If you're ketovore, you're probably taking in even less. You might still have a bit of vegetable, um, maybe 5 to 10 grams a day, depending on what you tolerate and your metabolism and everything else. And then you've got carnivore or zero carb, which is basically you're eating animal meats, um, some of their products if you can tolerate it, and no vegetables. For me, I can't tolerate any fruit or any vegetables at all. The ones that they say are okay for keto are big no-nos for IBS. So I don't do any vegetables. I don't do any plants of any kind. There are some people. Oh, hi there, B100,000, B100K. So I'm sure falafel is delicious. The problem for me is I'm allergic to garlic, which is why I don't eat it. If I even smell garlic, I start to break out in a rash. A little bit blotchy on my cheeks. This is because I was outside earlier, and my skin starts to get itchy. It is delicious, without a doubt, but I personally can't eat it. As far as Pepsi or any kind of pop, anything carbonated, I don't drink that because carbonation also super bad for super bad for IBS. And the other thing with chickpeas is that because chickpeas, any beans, lentils, seeds, or grains, I don't eat simply because I can't. They are horrible for IBS. So I've had to cut those out years ago. I have to avoid carbonated drinks as well. Yes, Drew, same with me. Now, if you're going to go keto or ketovore or carnivore, or any sort of meatvore in between, you can drink whatever you want to. But I would suggest, just my personal humble opinion, if you're going to be drinking any kinds of soda, you would probably be best sticking with the stuff that is sugar-free, especially if you want to keep your insulin down, because again, sugar is going to spike it way up. So there are people out there who can tolerate sweeteners and it doesn't affect them. I don't drink them for the fact of they're carbonated, and so that's big no for IBS sufferers. And also, I find that any kind of sweetener also really bad for IBS sufferers. And I also deal with osteoarthritis, so that does not help with the inflammation that comes with it. So and you know what? There are people who would say, "Oh my gosh, like there's nothing you can have. There's nothing you can enjoy." But actually, I don't miss it. I really don't. I was never, in spite of the fact that by the time I got to university, I was drinking probably 10 to 12 cans of Diet Coke a day. Um, that's because at that point, I didn't like the taste of coffee, but I knew that caffeine was an appetite suppressant. So that's why I drank it. And what I found was if you drink something long enough, you train your body to accept it to some degree. So, but I was always thirsty and always dehydrated because I didn't know at that point that caffeine can also be a dehydrator. So, yeah, that's for me. Whatever, honestly, whatever works for you, for your overall health, do that. If you're feeling great and what you're doing is helping, then please do that. You know, I just know what's worked for me. And some of these things I had to cut out a long time ago, like any pulses, lentils, beans, cereals, grains, any gluten, all vegetables, all fruit. These are all terrible things for my IBS. Now, if you can tolerate some of this, fantastic. Some of it I would probably just avoid completely because it's hard for the body to digest or, limit it. Um, but what I found out very quickly is that the things I did crave and that were really hard to give up, I will not lie, were the carbs, the processed carbs, and the sugars. So, for me, every fall, like September was my favorite month. You know why? Anybody else who enjoys their specialty coffees, you'll know, I think, what I'm about to say, which is, you know what? That is when Starbucks brings back the pumpkin spice latte, which used to be my favorite drink, even if I got it sugar free. And I had to have it every year. It was like this tradition, right? Just like at Christmas time, it was always the eggnog latte. Had to have the eggnog latte with the whipped cream and all that kind of stuff, you know? And again, you know what? Everyone is free to choose whatever they want to eat and drink. And that's not why I'm here at all. Okay. If you guys have questions, if you want to kind of know what I might be doing, and you're curious, absolutely fine. But no one gets to tell me what I should or shouldn't eat, just like I'm not going to tell you guys. I mean, let's face it, I trust we're all adults and we all know that whatever we eat will affect our bodies in some way or another. So if you figured out the things that you don't do well with, then you know what to avoid. But hey, if you want to eat certain things and you're feeling okay about it, it's not for me to say, right? But what I have found is, through all of this experience, is that I have found the most amazing changes in my overall health and well being by eating meat. For those of us who believe in God, as in the God of Jesus Christ, um, and that He created the world, or whether you, even if you don't, but for me, I believe in God, as in the God of Jesus, and I believe He created this world and everything on it, and that He created all the plants for the animals and the animals for us because they are the perfect food. They are what's the term? I think it's bioavailable, and our bodies were designed to easily accept and process and utilize the nutrients that come from the animals. Whether is and if you don't believe in Jesus being the Son of God, that's okay. If you come from a different faith, if you just simply maybe believe in nature or just something greater than yourself, whatever works for you. I'll borrow this from the 12-step room, which is a God of your understanding. Like for me, there is absolutely no way that I would be able to find every day the strength to deal with the negative thoughts in my head or anything else if I didn't accept that there was something greater than me that existed. Because I could not do that, you know? I couldn't do it by myself. And for me, That's a faith in God. Now, whatever yours is, whatever your higher power is, awesome, right? That to me is whatever is helping you to get through life, fantastic. But whatever you believe in, whether it's the God that I believe in or your, your religion, the God of your religion or the God of your understanding, I I think we can safely agree that something greater than us created the animals for us to eat, right? And so, and that includes anything that swam, that flew, that walked, crawled, or even slithered is potentially something for us to eat. And that's amazing, you know? I think that's fantastic. That is exactly what we should be doing. And some plants here and there, if they're local, if they're seasonal, and you can tolerate them, enjoy. It's not, like I said, I'm not here to judge either way. You eat what you feel like eating. But I realized that that's what's made the biggest difference for me. I spent so many years constantly trying the latest fad, the latest diet, the latest crazy pill or whatever it was, and it didn't work because it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't based on the nutrition that we were given through animals. I mean, let's face it, right? We've all been lied to. When the first food guides came out in the world, okay, and I think they first came out in the United States. And now I'm Canadian, for those who are wondering. Ours came out in the mid or late 70s, and it was a very close imitation of what the Americans had put together. Okay. The food guides were influenced by the National Dietetics Association, which was founded by members of the Seventh day Adventists who were all about promoting a plant based, heavy plant based diet, processed and otherwise. Okay. These are the same group of people who eventually said that margarine is better for you than real butter, which, by the way, is not true. If you ever watch Dr. Fung, Dr. Jason Fung has a video, I can't remember what it's called, but he talks about how linseed oil, which was originally used to light street lamps, they had all sorts of stuff left over, I think, as electricity started to come into play. And he was actually, the same people thought, well, this is going to be a waste. Hey, here's a thought. Let's get people to eat it. So industrial oils were used to make margarine. And he shows you, he goes behind the process of how it's formed. And honestly, if you watch it, you will never touch margarine again. The stuff is horrible. But I remember growing up, I was born in 1972. I remember growing up, and in our house, we always had bluebonnet margarine, right? Healthy for you. And meanwhile, no, it wasn't. And in fact, being told that low fat was better. Some of the doctors at Harvard, okay, who did eventually form the American Heart Association, were bribed by big sugar in the United States to lie and say that sugar was, oh yeah, gum is also made out of oil. It's true. Absolutely. It's disgusting, right? I remember seeing chocolate syrup as a kid. When we lived in Edmonton briefly, there was a syrup. I think it was called Crackle. You poured it on like a liquid over your ice cream, and within a couple minutes, it would harden. And it was made out of some of the same oils that was used to make floor polish. Yeah. So, yeah. I like gum too, but holy smokes, man, I don't want that in my mouth. No, thank you. You know what I mean? But these were products that, as modernization happened, so the original intent to use these oils, because they would burn for a long time, to use these oils to burn in lamps, well, we got, we're going to lose out. We got to do something else with them. I know, let's make something and tell people they can eat it. I mean, for goodness sakes, Crayola crayons are now intentionally made with non-toxic wax and have vitamins in them because little kids were chewing on the crayons. So instead of taking them away from your kids when you see them chewing on them, It's like, well, they're going to chew on them anyways. We might as well just add vitamins. Yeah, crayons, Crayola crayons. Crazy, right? It's insane. Um, anywhere you can buy Crayola crayons, yeah, they have added vitamins in them now, and they're non-toxic because they realized kids were putting them in their mouths. Go figure. So it's like adding vitamins to floor wax, really. But hey, so here we are. These guys were bribed to lie and say that sugar was causing high cholesterol. Or sorry, to say that saturated fats were causing high cholesterol, when in fact there is no causation between eating saturated fats from animals and high cholesterol. There is no report, no study anywhere that has shown causality in any regard. But sugar was definitely a key factor. And of course, Big Sugar didn't want to lose out. They were, heading into the confectionery future. And so they bribed these doctors at Harvard, part of the American Heart Association, who lied. Um, this came out, I think it was in 2015, where this information was made public. Definitely, I'm not super knowledgeable with chemistry. I wish I was. However, Dr. Anthony Chafee and Dr. or Professor Bart Kay are absolute geniuses. So you should definitely check them out. They have great content. They take the science but make it understandable. And another great one to follow is Professor Ben Bickman. Um, all great channels. If you want the breakdown molecule by molecule and mitochondria details and all that sort of thing, I wish I had that kind of brain power. I do not. I'm simply saying what they've already shared and their evidence thereof. Definitely go to them if you want more backup. They're a great place to go. Um, so why do I share all that? Because when I look and see that all of this has happened, and now I have discovered truly the healing that has come from eating the animals, like God, however you want to accept that or interpret that, um, God has provided us with the perfect nutrition. Animal meats, skeletal meats. There are people who like to eat the organs. I'm not one of them. And you don't have to get healing. If you decide to eat some of those organs, go right ahead. Your call, nothing wrong with it, one way or the other. I did at one point, I've had a couple of times where I've had these cravings for liver. So I've bought some at the store, made, oh, goat head. Sounds yummy. I understand. I know that is a delicacy in some places. Whereabouts are you? Those are harder to come by here in England. So fantastic. I honestly, I wish I was able to enjoy that. I have had liver a number of times. I've had kidney before. It was all right. I wasn't a huge fan. I cooked up the liver myself a couple of times, and I really, really enjoyed it. But last year, about this time, I was having too much of it. And then unfortunately, I let it stay in the fridge for too many days, and I didn't know that would be an issue. I didn't cook it right away. I ended up giving myself food poisoning. And then from there, I developed a kidney infection. Yoo-hoo! So I'm a little gun shy on having liver. Every now and again, I have had it at restaurants, a couple of really good Turkish places, and it was delicious. So apparently, the secret is for someone else to cook it and not me. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, there are some organs I have been wanting to try. I've been wanting to try brain. I've been wanting to try hypothalamus because I understand that's quite delicious. I would like to give kidney another try and maybe even heart someday. But that's only because I'm curious to see what it tastes like when it's cooked properly. And I do not pretend that that's me in any way. But other than that, I'm quite happy with what I regularly eat. So that's fatty ground beef, um, 20 to 23% fat, with a couple of egg yolks and fried fatty bacon on top. That's what I eat for my breakfast typically. And then I'm usually not hungry until dinner time. Sometimes we'll have lamb, sometimes we'll have other cuts of beef. The other day we had sirloin. Tonight I'm making a rack of beef ribs for my husband and my son and I, and I'm looking forward to that for sure. It'll be delicious, I have no doubt. But the thing I found really interesting was once I stopped drinking coffee to control my appetite, I finally figured out when I was really actually hungry and when I thought I was hungry because I was under stress or I was feeling anxious. That was my go to. If I felt anxious, I would say, I'm going to go get a coffee. I'd get a coffee and like a brownie or a caramel square or something like that. And that's great. B100K, if you don't drink coffee, seriously, that is awesome. Good for you. Eventually, I'm hoping to work my way to that point. I don't drink it. Now I don't drink it because I'm like, oh, I don't want to be hungry. I drink it simply because I really have been able to enjoy the taste. Um, I don't drink any of the flavored stuff. My treat is generally a cappuccino. I go out to one of the local coffee places, be it Starbucks or Costa or Cafe Nero, where I know they're going to make it nice. They're going to make it properly with an espresso machine, and it's a little bit of me time. I'll get out in my electric wheelchair. I will take my Kindle. I'll get to read and just enjoy my coffee. Kind of just that's my time. That's me time, right? So I make it something special. Outside of that, I'm trying to not drink coffee either. Um, I do drink decaf tea, but I make tea kind of like, okay, kind of like the way Lucy Van Pelt would make hot chocolate for her brother Linus, from the Peanuts game. Basically, I boil the water, I put the bag in just enough to change the color of the water, and then I take it out. So you know, there's not a whole lot there. That's what I'm saying. And um, she used to dip a brown crayon in hot water, and that's what she would call hot chocolate. I'm kind of do that with my tea. So anybody who is an actual tea drinker, you're not going to like my tea, but it works for me. And I know that ultimately having zero coffee in my system is going to be really good for my continuing healing from IBS and my chronic pain and so forth. I know it's not good. I know it's not ideal. And ultimately, there are really no benefits to coffee. Um, so I'm working at it slowly. Over the years, I have managed to cut down dramatically. By the time I was at university and I first started to drink coffee, I was easily drinking 20 to 22 cups of coffee a day, easily. And I'm down to right now one, maybe two. So I figure overall that's definitely an improvement. And hey, cool. I hope the Pepsi is enjoyable. Honestly, if that's what gives you that pleasure, then fantastic. Good for you. Oh yeah, 20 cups when I was at university, to the point where I would have blackouts. My left arm was going numb. I had tingling down my whole right side, but it didn't matter because it kept me from wanting to eat, which is why I was doing it. Definitely not healthy. That was a very disordered relationship with food right there. So I figure if I'm down to one, maybe two at the most a day, I figure I'm getting there. And ultimately, yes, my goal is ultimately to not want to drink coffee at all. Yeah, that definitely was a tad bit extreme. But when you're in the throes of an eating disorder, though 19.9 would be normal, fair enough. Indeed, you're hilarious, B100K. Yes. Um, but eventually I had to start cutting back, and I didn't want to feel hunger. I was petrified. I was so anxious and so panicked about feeling hungry and then going on that binge, purge, guilt, restrict cycle. And I wasn't actually, yes, you are very funny. I wasn't ready for that to stop until my last year of university, where I ended up meeting some fantastic people who are Christian, and I became one myself. And I realized I'm out of control. I thought that by drinking all this coffee and controlling the fact I wasn't going to eat, that I had control. And in fact, the reality is the harder I tried to hold on to control, the less I had. And it was terrifying. And even then, even though I started to eat again, those feelings, those moments of panic over food and is it going to make me gain weight? Am I going to, is this going to happen? Is that going to happen? That never left. So when my husband asked me yesterday, oh, oh, you're still struggling with those negative thoughts? He goes, well, that's ridiculous. I love you. You're beautiful. You look great, which is wonderful. And I, after 25 years of marriage, almost, it's amazing to still hear that. But I realized through these last 2.5 years of getting rid of brain fog and the inflammation and the weight going down and all this kind of stuff, what I came to see was that, you know what? I've never dealt with these feelings. I never allowed myself to face any of it. I was just living in that state of panic. I wasn't ready to heal fully. And absolutely, yes, and he was a prophet. That's fantastic. So there we go. We both know that he oh, well, thank you, Druvy Jane. Yes, we do celebrate. We're not quite sure. We're going to take a trip somewhere warm. Probably, we think. We're hoping. We're kind of seeing where we're at. We went this past summer. We went to Canada to visit our son, and we had him come back to visit for a month, and then my husband went back to see him at New Year's. So we're trying to decide where we're going to go for our 25th. Thank you very much for your good wishes. Um, and that's, by the way, B100K. That's so cool. Yeah, he was also a prophet. Absolutely. So that's great. We're not too far different, you and I. And God, however we view God ourselves, you know what? God is amazing. He created us all. And I realized what I needed. Um, yes. Well, there you go. So, absolutely. Now, what I realized though was that I needed to get back my faith with God. Okay. And that's what was going to help me. I needed to walk closely with God because through all of those years, raising kids, working, moving from Canada to England, all of it, there was so much that went on in our life. Finding out our older son had autism, and that was a whole bunch of advocating for him and getting things sorted. And our younger son, who he wasn't finally diagnosed until he was 18, but had ADHD. And although we suspected, it took forever to get that confirmed. So dealing with all of that and ourselves, right? And work and life and everything else that happens. So 2020, I just been told that in addition to my IBS and my spinal injury, my irritated sacroiliac joint, which I wasn't sure where it was. So if you guys don't know, don't feel bad, neither did I, but it's that bit. So at the bottom of your spine, there's a piece of bone, okay, like that, right? And it's got joints to the side, and what it does is it connects into your hip bones, into your pelvis. And it's that little bit just before your tailbone that allows for movement. So when you're sitting or you're laying down or you're whatever it is, that's where you get that movement in your lower back because of the disc that broke that bulged out back in 2014. It was irritating that and continues to do so. So it's inflamed constantly and it's irritated all the time. However, today it is at a manageable level, which is great, right? So that was going on, and in addition to that, it was confirmed that I had the beginnings of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. My triglycerides were far too high. Why? Because apparently all the fruit I was told to eat, slip disc. Yeah, basically. It was between my L4 and L5. So the bottom two disc, the bottom two vertebra in the lower part of the back. And I don't even have a cool story to go with it. I don't. I was leaning over and bending to pull laundry out of the dryer, kind of like that motion, and it just went. So, yeah, which then triggered my fibromyalgia, which it took them a year to diagnose, which also set off my Raynaud's, my osteoarthritis. And it turns out they put me on statins for the triglycerides. And then when I went to see the specialist on March the 20th of 2020, she confirmed that I had hypothyroidism, so underactive thyroid, and there was nothing else to do but start me on thyroid medication. And then 3 days later, we were in lockdown for COVID. Yay! So all of that was going on. And of course, everybody was under constant stress, anxiety, concern. Who's going to catch it? Are we going to be okay through? I went through COVID as well, B100K. I had no symptoms though. I tested positive, but I had no symptoms. Okay. Yeah, I'm not supposed to lift anything heavy either. I can't. And even though the disc has come back a little bit on its own after all this, after 8 years, they say that it will probably never fully go back and it continues to irritate the nerves in my lower back. So they figured that is probably what's keeping the fibro going. But by the end of May of 2020, I was weighing in at 200 pounds. Okay, I'm about 120 now, right? 5'5". I don't know, normal size, I guess. So that's a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight. And a lot of that was definitely pain and inflammation. But I was eating the stuff they said to, like I was eating whole wheat toast and lots of white rice, and I was eating mashed potatoes and peanut butter and bananas. All of those things are highly inflammatory. Plus, I'm gluten intolerant. And so I decided, my husband and I were, by the time May came around, we both agreed, yes, we need to lose a bit of weight. Okay. And I wanted to do this and not try to trigger any bulimic like patterns. Right. And so we tried paleo because his sister-in-law had done it. And she lost, I think, 30 or 40 pounds, and she reversed her Hashimoto's. And so we decided, yeah, let's do that. So I got the book on my Kindle. The deal was I would read what we had to do, and then he would just do it, which is awesome, by the way. He's just like, you just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Fantastic. I could have slipped a few extra things in there. I didn't, but I'm just saying that power, woo, that was awesome. So basically what happened was within, I think, 2 or 3 weeks, he had already lost almost 13 pounds going paleo. The problem was, which I didn't realize until I found keto, or I remembered about keto because my sister-in-law started it back in 2016 for her arthritis, right? But what I didn't realize was that all of the nuts and the leafy greens, the avocado, and the limited number of fruit that they suggest are all the things I had to avoid like the plague, and I did not. I am in some physical discomfort. These are my compression gloves. So I don't know if you guys know what Raynaud's syndrome is. It's basically where you constantly have cold fingertips and toes, even if it's not cold out, right? If it's cold out, it's even worse. But your brain, what they tell me is that the brain sends signals out to the vessels to either open or close when they shouldn't, right? So if it's a hot day out, my brain will tell the vessels to close, and then my fingertips and my toes get really cold, and then they go numb, and then they eventually thaw. It is bearable, actually, B100K. Thank you so much for asking. It's one of those things, if you have chronic pain, you kind of go, yeah, that's just, I'm just used to it now, whatever. it used to be really sharp pain. And sometimes I'll feel it in my wrists. I've been doing some other stuff and typing today, so that will affect it, which is why I use a Kindle, because I love real books, but they are too much for me to hold like this for a long period of time. My wrists would start to ache. There was a time where the inflammation was so bad and the pain was so bad that I actually had to have a carer come in every morning and help me with washing my hair, showering, getting dressed, and so on, because my husband would be away at work and it hurt too much for me to do it myself. So here I was carrying 80 extra pounds. I mean, I weighed more than I did with my second pregnancy. And it was absolutely horrifying. It was awful because I didn't know there was a better way to eat. I had no idea, right? I thought I was being healthy. Here I was trying to restrict as much as possible. Your hands would sweat. Oh, wow, that's awful. I'm sorry to hear that. That's terrible. It is. It truly is. I never reached that point, but I found my wrists would start to feel like they were swollen, like they were balloons being blown up, because that's where I've got the worst of the arthritis. So by that time in 2020, and I at that point I still needed to use a crutch just to walk around through the house, and it sucked. And then of course you add the stress of everybody possibly getting COVID, and is that just a cold or do you have COVID and what's going to happen, et cetera, and et cetera. And by the time it was the end of May, and we got 3 weeks into this book, right? So the author was saying, cut out sugar, dairy, soy, and gluten. Okay, well, I wasn't really having any dairy. I mean, as far as milk, other than if it was baked in a cake or something. I cut out gluten, cut out sugar, and soy I didn't consume anyways. And oh my goodness, the first few days were awful. They totally sucked because I was so used to being a carb burner and rewarding myself with baked goods, right? Hey, I might get COVID, might die. I'm going to have a brownie, whatever. And I'm sure many of us were like that. But once I got past the first week was the worst. All right, cutting out sugar and gluten and dairy, whether it was milk or whatever. Yeah, that was the hardest part. And I felt awful. I was so tired and I had headaches and I felt like my skin was breaking out and itchy all the time. I didn't realize until much later that that was obviously because I was probably getting rid of oxalates and clearing out my system. The problem was with all the dark leafy greens and all the things that I shouldn't have been having because I knew I couldn't handle them for the IBS. I was trying to force my body to accept it. And yeah, it was a really bad idea. And when I hadn't lost any weight at all, although my husband had lost 13 pounds, I was so upset and so frustrated that I needed something else. So I thought, oh, keto. I remember, you know, my sister-in-law and my brother talking about them trying keto. So I thought, why not? What have I got to lose? And so that's where I first started, was the ketogenic protocol. And as soon as they said, yeah, cut out dark leafy greens or anything that upsets your gut, I was like, yay, that's fantastic. I've had headaches and tried sleeping it out. Actually, what I have found, at least first thing in the morning, because I've been cutting down my coffee consumption quite a bit, is I either make myself something to eat that's got quite a bit of fat in it, so like bacon or fatty beef I cook up, and I find that often will help with the headaches. But I also have been known to go back and take a nap. And of course, drinking lots of water helps. And I'm trying now to be mindful so that I'm not anxious constantly, certainly about the things I have no control over, because that's not going to solve it anyways. And that's been helping. But oh yeah, I've definitely had headaches where I just was like, that's it. I just want to go sleep, and that has helped. If it's something like if we're at church or we're in the car somewhere, and I have a hard time falling asleep, then water seems to be the first best place to go. Absolutely. You know, so I started keto, and one of the people I was following at the time had been making videos about she was going to try the carnivore challenge. And I thought to myself, well, what's that? And by this point, I'd already been able to phase out most all fruit and quite a bit of the vegetables, because the ones that were okay for keto, the non-starchy ones like the broccoli and the cauliflower, are, if anyone out there has IBS, you know these are a disaster for anybody with gut issues, be it IBS or leaky gut. Um, and so when she talked about her going carnivore, I found her, and then you go through the rabbit hole of YouTube like you do, and I came across Ken Berry, and one of the things he said in one of his older videos, but that stuck with me, was you do not need to eat grass-fed, grass-finished beef massaged by pandas and fancy cuts if you can't afford that. He's like, find the meats that you enjoy, that you can afford, and eat those. And so for me, that was freeing. And out of nowhere, because I had not eaten, I don't think I'd eaten burgers in a while, not on purpose, just hadn't wanted them. And I found Kelly Hogan at Zero Carb Life talking about how she would go in and order like a dozen burger patties, the little ones, and she calls them her meat cookies. And I thought, wow, this seems a little weird, but she's healthier. Let me see what happens, right? So, I realized that there might be something here. And out of nowhere, I had this craving for ground beef, for beef mince. Not the not and I tried it with just the regular stuff, which is really lean over here. It's really hard to it's really, really hard to get fattier cut meat. I mean, fresh. Most butchers won't do higher than 10% because it's from the trimmings after they do the butchering, and that's usually lean, right? So I started with lean, and it was too lean. For me, I found that I needed more fat to satiate me. And so I worked my way up to 20% fat beef. But even then, even at 10%, that beef with a bit of salt and some egg yolks and a bit of bacon mixed in was amazing. And for the first time, I think probably in my whole life, I not only felt fed and nourished, but I really didn't want anything else to eat for at least another 4 or 5 hours, which was crazy to me because as a carb burner, our brains can only take so much glucose at a time, right? And then it needs more, and then it needs more, and then it needs more. And the same thing is if we're eating carbs and sugar, those are burned quickly. And whatever we don't burn, we store it as fat eventually. So, hey, you know what? B100K, if pizza and Nutella has helped you, I I guess that's great, so you're not feeling the headache. I cannot eat anything processed, no seed oils, no processed anything, no grains, no nothing like that, because it just causes me inflammation, bloating, pain. You couldn't finish it. Um, it could be, maybe, maybe, maybe try something like a nice cut of steak or a piece of lamb or even some chicken wings. Or if not, water's always good, right? That might help. Sleep, also probably a good thing to do as well. But I would say what I was told is if I was getting headaches while I was eating, I was probably dehydrated. So that might help. Just a thought. Don't know. Maybe. Um, and once I started eating carnivorous and I got rid of everything else, for me at least, that was the magic. But as I started to lose more and more weight, I mean, I lost the first 60 pounds between end of July and I think end of October. And a lot of it was inflammation. And a lot of it was pain and bloating and water weight. That's fine. It's still weight and it was gone, baby. But as I got smaller in size, I started to panic. I was so worried that it's all going to just come back. It's all going to be a dream, and all the clothes I had to buy, I'm going to have to give away, and none of it works, and it's all this and all, that whole mentality. And that's when I realized I was turning something that should have been success and something I should have been thankful for into just another excuse to panic for nothing. And I realized then I cannot fix the mental part of things. Um, oh, thank you, Drew Jane. I could not fix what was up here mentally by myself. I needed something else. And for me, that was turning back to God and really getting close to Him again. Because for about 17 years up to that point, it's not like I stopped believing, but, you know, it was it was nowhere near what it should have been. I had once been very faithful and committed and prayed a lot and surrendered to Him. And when I started relying on my own self, my own strength, well, that just never went very well. And I realized that if I want to get recovery from these things, I need something bigger than myself to trust it. And for me, it was a no-brainer. That was turning to God, because how else was I going to do this? I couldn't do it myself. If I could, I would have done it years ago. So at that point, after 35 years of battling with bulimia, with, you know, binging and purging and guilt and restrictive cycles and disordered food relationships and everything else that goes on in the head, like phew, wheels that were constantly spinning, plus the anxiety and the depression, all of that, I finally started to get a handle on, because I realized I couldn't do it myself on my own strength. I just couldn't. There may be some people who do. I'm not one of them. For me, that is relying on God. He gave everything necessary for this life, but I had to learn how to accept it and how to use it and then be grateful for it. And for me, that's made a huge difference. So, um, so there can eating just meat help with food addictions and disorders? Absolutely. However, I realized that the key was it wasn't enough just to get the food right. I needed to have the spiritual and mental and emotional well-being to go with it. And for me, that was getting back to God. So I kind of like to explain it as, it's as if for those 17 years, that period where we had a lot of different challenges in our family, during that period, my faith never went away fully. It was kind of like a little tea light candle, when it's all gone liquid and the flame, is close to going out, but it hasn't just yet. That was where my faith was. But being able to reconnect to God and deepen my faith, that's like being the flame in the pilot light of the furnace. So unless someone turns off the gas, in other words, unless life ends, it's done. And that's where I feel like my faith is now. And submitting to God and trying to find out what He wants for my life and following the Spirit, that's what this is about. I don't do this because I don't want money. I'm not trying to earn any money. I don't do this for being paid or anything like that. Seriously, my life has been transformed. Yes, through eating a carnivorous diet, absolutely. But without my relationship with God, without submitting to God, none of it would matter. It honestly would not, because the mental stuff, it wasn't enough for me just to change how I ate. And I figured that out, luckily, right around the same time. So that's kind of where I'm at with everything. And yes, you know what? The chronic pain is still there. I still have pain in my neck. I still have aches and pains. It's just one of those things where most days it's bearable. My medications that I take are actually working. You believe in Islam. That's okay. No worries. Thank you, anyways, for coming to the stream, B100K. I appreciate you being here. I mean, how else are we going to learn about each other if we don't talk amongst, other people and other beliefs? And well, there you go. Submission to God. And I'm all about that. So my prayer life has dramatically improved without a doubt. And I'm grateful because through 20, almost 25 years of marriage, my husband and I are faithful Christians today, definitely just wanting to do whatever it is God has planned for us. And, as somebody once, oh, and you're Hindu. That's very cool. Awesome. Always nice to talk to people of different faiths. It really is. The one thing I would say is that it's been an amazing journey. And what I personally believe is there is a great tapestry. We are all a different thread in that tapestry. We don't actually get to see what the finished work looks like, only God does. But we're part of it. And I think it's amazing that we're all a different thread in the tapestry. And yeah, whatever you happen to believe in, all good. If anything I've shared, if anything I've said has been helpful in any way, that's why I do it. That's the only reason why. So that's going to be it for me, guys. I'm so glad you hung out and you stayed here. It is just after 5 o'clock here in Colchester, England, where we live, and I am on my way to go get the oven ready to make some yummy beef ribs for dinner tonight. So I hope you guys have a fantastic Saturday or Sunday, depending on the time where you guys are. I really am so glad you guys came to check out my live stream. I've never actually had people stop to comment before, so I appreciate that. And it's always great to hear from different people, different backgrounds, different beliefs, to find out not what we have different, but what things we have in common. Because I think we have a lot more alike and in common than we don't. And you be safe too, B100K. Thank you guys so much for dropping in. Lovely to chat with you all. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll be back soon. All right. Bye, guys. Thanks again.